What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Orochimaru never betrayed Konoha and trained Naruto? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto was running down the streets with tears in his eyes. Why wouldn't anyone ever leave him alone? All he wanted to do was play at the festival, but the second he walked out of his apartment he was chased by a horde of villagers. Die demon. You should have been killed 8 years ago. Today we finish what the fourth started. Naruto continued to run each year. He was chased by a mob only to be saved by Anbu, or Hokage Gigi, but he's never had to run this long before. Naruto runs into an alley hoping to get away from the mob, but to his horror it was a dead end. He was trapped. The mob stopped briefly and Naruto wondered what they were doing when a gruff-looking man stepped out and appeared to be the one who started the mob. He began to speak. Demon. For 8 years you have gone unpunished, and foolishly protected by the Sandaime Hokage, but no longer. For today, while the Anbu are kept out of the streets by the civilian council, the 8-year anniversary of your defeat by the Yondaime Hokage, you finally shall receive your punishment. As the mob closed in, Naruto began to cry. He wasn't going to be saved this time. He was going to die. Inside the seal, most people probably think of the Kyuubi as a fearless beast that without a second thought could level cities to the ground. Well, that is normally true, but there was one thing that even the Kyuubi was afraid of: death. Kyuubi was scared, cross that he was absolutely terrified. Kyuubi was immortal, but the fool Yondaime bound him to his host, so when Naruto dies so will he. He wasn't some angel that goes to heaven. No, he knew where he would go, and it was not a pleasant place. Kyuubi knew he would reform many years later, but he didn't want to find out what spending all the years in hell while his body reformed. Kyuubi was currently frantically trying to figure out a way to save himself by slamming himself against the cage bars, trying to dig under the bars, and beating the bars with his tails. There was no way to escape. The blasted Yondaime's seal was just as strong. Kyuubi collapsed against the ground, seemingly giving up when he felt an ancient presence deep inside that he hadn't sensed before. He immediately channeled his chakra to that point in a last effort to save himself. If he succeeded, then his host would never be the same again. Outside the seal, Naruto was feeling pain, so much pain as the rain of punches, kicks, and kunai seemed to never end. Suddenly everyone stopped and backed up a few steps, and then the man that Naruto could tell was the person who stepped forward earlier came up with a dagger in his hand and stated, "Demon, your time has come to an end. It is time to face your punishment, which is death." As the man stepped forward, Naruto began to cry again, asking aloud, "What have I done? I've never hurt anyone, honest." His pleas fell on deaf ears as the man continued to walk forward. As the man was bringing his hand down for the final blow, Naruto cringed for the blow to come, but suddenly he felt incredibly powerful. He thrust his hands out while shouting, "Shinra Tensei! Almighty push!" Suddenly everything that was in the alleyway found itself thrown a great distance before they hit the ground unconscious. 1 hour later, a man was walking down the street back to his apartment after a night of drinking with his team. He had long black hair, angular snake-like eyes, and pale skin. This was Orochimaru, student of the Sandaime Hokage and member of the legendary Densatsu no Sannin. When Orochimaru saw all the people strewn all over the place, he immediately went on guard. When he looked around, he couldn't see what could have caused this. When he was looking around, he heard what sounded like a young boy crying. Orochimaru immediately went to where he heard the boy crying to see if the little boy saw what happened. When he went into the alley, the first thing he noticed was that the small boy looked terrible. Underfed, beaten, and stabbed. His first thought was, why would anyone do this to such a young boy? That's when he noticed who the boy was. He was the fourth's legacy, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Don't get him wrong, he wasn't an idiot. He knew how strong the seal was, and there was no chance of the fox breaking loose on its own. Orochimaru wasn't a fool. He knew that those people probably had tried to kill the young boy, but how they ended up like this was something that he did want to know. When he walked toward the boy, he noticed Naruto stop crying, and then Naruto said so sadly, "Please don't kill me, I didn't do anything wrong." Orochimaru might not be the nicest guy around, but he quickly stopped walking, kneeled down and said to him, "I don't want to hurt you, how about we take you to the hospital and get your wounds treated?" Naruto said solemnly with his eyes still closed, "They won't treat me at the hospital. They say they don't want the patients being exposed to a demon." At this point Orochimaru was flabbergasted. He knew there were a lot of fools inside Konoha, but he didn't realize that most the village were complete idiots. To not let a young boy in who was injured into the hospital was outrageous. Orochimaru thought for a second, said, "Come, I have a subordinate who is trained as a medic nin, he will treat you and fix you up." Naruto looked up at the young man and opened his eyes. Orochimaru was shocked cause instead deep blue that he had expected, it was purple with a ripple pattern. Orochimaru grinned widely. Orochimaru only saw this dojutsu once before when he went to check on Jiraiya when he was training the 3 orphans from AIM. Orochimaru knew what this eye could do when Jiraiya showed off the kid's abilities. Maybe Orochimaru had found someone to take under his wing as an apprentice, Yes, Anko was his apprentice, but he taught her all he could. As promised, Orochimaru took Naruto to Kabuto to heal him. When Kabuto left for a minute to go get some rubbing alcohol to disinfect Naruto's cuts. When Orochimaru pulled him aside, "Kabuto, I want you to look out for the boy, and when you're done treating him take him home and make sure he is safe. His eyes intrigue me and I wish to make him my apprentice in order to learn more about his eyes." Kabuto's eyes widened. "Are you sure, master? This is a great risk considering who you are. This could hurt your reputation here in Konoha." Orochimaru only chuckled while stating I couldn't care less what those foolish villagers think of me. I am a Sannin, an icon of power." At this Orochimaru shined away to research more about the boy's eyes. 3 days later, council chambers. "Here is and surely you see that thing is a threat to the village and must be killed," said Homura. His counterpart Kaharu decided to speak up and stated, "He attacked and injured several villagers. The brat must be exiled or executed." Suddenly from the door a voice stated, "I wouldn't do that if I were you. And just who do you think you are barging in here?" "Oh, Orochimaru," stuttered a shocked Kaharu. "When the boy was attacked by those people that you claim he attacked, he somehow unlocked a Kake Genkai seen only twice ever before." The Sandame decided to speak up at that point. "Orochimaru, what did Naruto unlock, and who were the 2 others that had it?" Orochimaru answered his sensei's question. "The eye is called the Rinnegan and is immensely powerful. I'd be willing to say stronger than the Sharingan." The council was flabbergasted. They had always thought that the Sharingan was the most powerful eye in existence, but here was one of their most powerful shinobi telling them that an 8-year-old now had something much stronger than that. Homura slowly stuttered out, "Who were the other 2 T2 have this ability?" Orochimaru smirked and stated, "One was an orphan in AIM named Nagato." Unbeknownst to the rest of the council, Danzo growled at the mention of Nagato. "And the second," Orochimaru continued, "was the legendary Rikudo Sannin." The room was suddenly lacking oxygen as the whole council simultaneously gasped. Even the Sandame was gaping like a fish out of water. Finally Councillor Haruno screamed out, "I thought the Rikudo Sannin was just a legend." Everyone winced at the volume of the Banshee Queen. As Orochimaru chuckled, only a civilian would be so naive to believe that in the ninja world that there is any such thing as a legend. All legends must start from somewhere, and the Rinnegan is what made the Rikudo Sannin so great. "So don't you fools see," Orochimaru continued, "if you exile or execute Naruto you threaten to lose someone who has the potential to be the most powerful ninja in existence." At that statement Danzo spoke up, "Here is and let me take the boy into my root program. Not only shall he become loyal to Konoha, he shall become stronger than anyone could imagine." At that the Sandame spoke, "No Danzo, I will not permit it. I said no 8 years ago and my decision hasn't changed. But we do need someone to train him because surely the other villages will hear about this and try to kidnap him or kill him." "That won't be a problem, sensei," Orochimaru spoke up. "I have decided to train him myself." "Are you sure, Orochimaru?" asked the Sarutobi clan head. "I thought you weren't going to take another student after Anko." "I thought so too, sensei, but his eyes intrigue me and there isn't another person in this village that can train him as well as I could. Except for Jiraiya, but he's only in the village every once in a while and can't take a student. And Anko didn't have the aptitude for a weapon like I do, and I couldn't teach her most of my elemental jutsu due to her having a different elemental affinity. But with the Rinnegan he can master any type of ninjutsu." "I see," said the Sandame. "I approve. Make him strong, Orochimaru." "Of course, sensei," responded Orochimaru. Meanwhile with Naruto. Naruto had gone to sleep when he appeared before a giant cage in what appeared to be a giant sewer. He was looking around when he heard a deep growl. Naruto immediately jumped up and shouted, "Who's there?" Not even a second after he said this, two glowing red eyes opened up and a dark form with 9 tails revealed itself and calmly stated, "I am known as Kyuubi." Naruto was terrified when he saw the giant fox. Despite his fear of the giant fox, he shouted at it, "That's a lie. The Yondaime killed the Kyuubi, you couldn't be him." At this the demon just chuckled and said, "Foolish young mortal, one cannot kill me. I am a living mass of chakra. The only way to defeat me is to seal me. No one has the power to defeat me. Only one has ever lived with the ability to match my power, and he died over 1,000 years ago." Naruto couldn't believe it. The Yondaime didn't kill the Kyuubi? Though what Naruto didn't understand was why he was in the sewers, and also why the Kyuubi was stuck in the sewers. So Naruto asked, "Why'd the Yondaime seal you in the sewers?" At this the Kyuubi gave a loud and guttural laugh. After he finished laughing, the Kyuubi spoke, "Child, this isn't the sewers, this is your mind." At this Naruto screamed at the demon, "What do you mean my mind?" Kyuubi chuckled at the young boy's antics and calmly spoke, "It is quite simple. The Yondaime took you when you were a baby and sealed me into you." Naruto collapsed to his knees. Suddenly it all made sense, the mobs, the ridicule, the shouts of, "Demon brat." It suddenly all made sense and Naruto fell to the ground and started to weep, "So that why everyone hates me, why I've always been alone, it's because I'm a demon." The Kyuubi snarled then said, "Please you, a demon, don't make me laugh. You're about as much a demon as I am a harmless kitten." This made Naruto confused, "So the why does everyone hate me?" he said in a voice so sad that if it was anything other than Kyuubi it would have almost cried. In response Kyuubi snarled, "Because they're all ignorant fools. The fact they could even think I would even consider try to inhabit the body of an impressionable child is insulting. The fearsome Kyuubi took over an innocent child, yeah, that will earn me fear," said Kyuubi with sarcasm dripping from his words. He continued, "Just because we're demons doesn't mean we don't have honor. We demons would never dream of stooping so low. Well, maybe Shukaku might, but he's a bit, how should I say it, touched in the head. But I a demon with honor and strength and will fight no one who is not in their prime unless they challenge me to a duel, and even then I shall not accept if I feel they are unworthy." At this point Naruto felt the need to ask, "Then why did you attack the leaf 8 years ago?" For those that don't remember, Naruto just turned 8. Kyuubi suddenly had a look of barely suppressed rage as Ha spoke, "I never wanted to attack your miserable village. I was forced to by a man from that cursed clan, the Uchiha." At this the Kyuubi had an idea, "Kid, I have an offer for you." Naruto looked at him confused and asked, "What do you mean?" Kyuubi responded, "If you help me take revenge on the one who forced me to attack your village and forcing you to live your life alone, I will help you train your new abilities given to you by your eyes. What do you say?" At this Naruto looked down so that a shadow covered his eyes, then his face split with a menacing grin as he responded, "Give me the strength and I will make sure he was never born." Kyuubi smiled menacingly, and replied, "Very good, but you are not yet ready. Find someone who can teach you the ways of shinobi. I will know when you are ready and I will communicate with you through a mental link. Now it's time for you to wake up, there is someone who wants to talk to you." At this Naruto felt himself gaining consciousness and set off to find a teacher. As Naruto woke up he put on his goggles to hide his eyes and set off in search of a sensei like Kyuubi had told him to. As he was walking he came to the realization, "Where the heck am I supposed to find a sensei?" Kyuubi heard him and suggested that Naruto check one of the many training grounds located throughout the village. So Naruto headed towards a training ground that a convenient sign labeled, "Training Ground 7, completely oblivious to the figure secretly following him. As Naruto finally got to the training ground he was disappointed to find that there was no one there. He was about to turn around to head back and search for a new training ground when he heard a voice inside his head scream, "Kid, move." When Naruto heard this he immediately jumped to the side as an enormous snake slithered past right where he had been. Silently thanking Kyuubi for helping him he noticed that the snake had turned around for a second go at him. Silently cursing his luck he kept dodging the snake but each time just barely. After almost 20 minutes of dodging he was beginning to tire. As he attempted to dodge again he stumbled and fell to the ground as the snake was almost right on top of him. As the snake opened its mouth to eat Naruto a voice shout, "That's enough, you may go home now." Once the voice said this the snake stopped, did something that looked like the snake was bowing, and then it disappeared into smoke. Naruto stood up and turned around to see the man that had helped him the other day. So naturally, him being Naruto yelled at the man, "Hey, what's the big idea sending that big snake after me?" At the child antics, Orochimaru chuckled. "Kukuku, forgive me Naruto-kun, I just wanted to test you to see strong you are, and I must say for an 8-year-old you did quite well." At this, Naruto was confused. Test him? What did he mean by that? So Naruto decided to ask him just that. "Hey, who are you anyways, and what do you mean by test me?" He looked at Naruto and chuckled, "Kukuku Naruto-kun, I am Orochimaru, the legendary snake Sannin and member of the Densatsu no Sannin, and I was testing you to see if you're worthy of being my new apprentice." Naruto couldn't believe his luck. Not only did he find a sensei, but by the way this guy was talking and the aura of power that was around him, he could tell that this man was also extremely powerful. But just to be safe, "Hey Kyuubi, you think this guy would make a good sensei?" The Kyuubi figured since the kid had just started the academy that he wouldn't know the man. He said, "Yes, he would make an excellent sensei. There are few out there that would be able to train you better." After hearing the Kyuubi approve of this man, he spoke up with his usual Naruto tone, "Really? Yata, I'm totally gonna be Hokage now that I've got an awesome sensei." Orochimaru's sweat dropped at the young boy's antics while thinking, "I'm definitely gonna have to work on making him act more like a ninja. I've got a lot of work ahead of me." Ending his train of thought, he decided to speak up and hopefully stop the horrendous dance that Naruto had started to do. "Your training shall start today, so first of all stop that horrendous dance you're doing, much better, and second begin your physical work of 200 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 20 minutes of planks, 80 pull-ups, and 4 laps around the village. Then we shall begin your chakra control exercises. Since you have a lot of chakra, it will be difficult and the basics will take a while, but by tutoring, by the time you graduate the academy you shall be able to crush any genin, able to beat or be on par with most chunin, and be able to delay most jonin. Is that clear?" Naruto stood straight as a board and shouted, "Yes, sensei." Orochimaru chuckled to himself as he realized that making this boy his apprentice would be more entertaining than he originally thought. Time skipped to 10 years old. Naruto has been apprenticed to Orochimaru for 2 years and has begun learning about his ocular powers, but has only learned Shinra Tensai, Almighty Push, Bansho Tenin, Universal Pull, how to absorb chakra, and the basics of Chibaku Tensai, Planetary Devastation, but hasn't mastered it yet, along with several Futon Ninjutsu, Daibakuha, Great Breakthrough, Wind Air Bullets, I don't know what it is in Japanese, and Air Wall Jutsus, has learned Shadow Snake Hands, and the Habi Taijutsu style, plus is studying seals from scrolls that Jiraiya gives him when he is in the village. Orochimaru watched with pride as he saw Naruto finish his training for the day. He wanted to be sure he had enough energy left for the surprise he had planned for him later. He remembered when Naruto had found out about his Kusanagi blade. He had gone crazy begging to get a blade of his own, but Orochimaru always told him he wasn't ready. But Orochimaru had seen his growth in both strength and maturity in the 2 years Naruto had been learning from him. Orochimaru chuckled to himself as he remembered the day he made Naruto get rid of his horrendously ugly orange jumpsuit. The kid threw a fit but in the end relented and now wears a black t-shirt with a red Uzumaki spiral on the front with a black padded leather jacket that went down to his mid-thighs and had loose sleeves that were perfect for hiding his hidden blades and poison senbon launcher. Along with the jacket he had black Anbu-style pants along with his kunai holsters on his right thigh, shuriken holsters on his left. His sealing supplies were sealed into the right shoulder of his jacket, and his medic kit was sealed into the left shoulder, and to finish the look he had Anbu-style plated gloves on each hand. In case you haven't noticed, black is my favorite color. Though Naruto had a ways to go before he graduated the academy, he felt he was ready to receive a blade of his own. Orochimaru called out to Naruto, "Naruto, come, I have something. I believe you are ready to take the next step as my apprentice. It is time for you to receive a blade like my Kusanagi." Naruto's eyes widened slightly and bowed slightly to his sensei and said, "Sensei, I am honored that you finally decided I was ready." After he said this, he felt excitement overwhelm him as his mood shifted dramatically, and he began to pester Orochimaru. "What kind of sword am I getting, huh, sensei? Is it one like yours? Will it have the same abilities? Where is it? When will you begin to teach me the katas?" Orochimaru suddenly felt his eye begin to twitch as he could have sworn Naruto had gotten past this stage of his life, but no matter, it was time to take him to the Dragon's Forge in the Land of Snakes. the very place where his sword the Kusanagi was crafted. So Orochimaru quieted Naruto with a simple rise of his hand signaling him to stop because he needed to say something. Naruto, getting your very own sword is not as simple as me handing you one. Especially one as special as a blade with quality on par with Kusanagi. First I shall take you to the home of the snake summons, where I shall take you to Dragon's Forge. From there you will proceed to make a large cut and press it on a special seal. The seal shall record your blood and chakra so that channeling chakra into it will be far more effective than when using just normal chakra conductive metals. Along with you being the only one capable of wielding it without taking damage from it, it will have special abilities that no one would be able to predict. Naruto was getting more and more excited after each and every word. He hoped that his sword would have some awesome ability like being able to disintegrate his opponents or some awesome like that. His thoughts were interrupted as a large snake about as tall as a full-grown golden retriever showed up in a plume of smoke. The snake spoke, "Lord Orochimaru, the preparations have been made. Are you and your apprentice ready?" Orochimaru looked at the summon and said, "Yes, reverse summon us so we may begin the ceremony." He then turned to look at Naruto. "Are you ready? The birth of your weapon will not be an easy one, and it could very easily be a month before you are back to full strength. I was unconscious for 3 full days and then it was another 2.5 weeks before I was back to full strength." Without missing a beat, Naruto immediately responded, "If it means getting stronger, sensei, I would go through any trial this world can throw at me." Orochimaru chuckled at his apprentice's determination and decided to continue. "There is a chance that it shall not give you a weapon even after the hardships you shall go through." Anko tried to get a weapon, but even after all the effort she didn't receive anything. "Are you willing to take the risk?" Naruto immediately responded with, "No risk is too great in the quest for obtaining power. It was one of the first things you pounded into my head, sensei." Orochimaru chuckled at hearing this and said, "You have learned well, my student. Now let us go so that you may take the next step in your quest for strength." And with that the two of them exploded into smoke, signifying that they were reversed summoned. Home of Snake Summons. I don't know what it's called. Naruto and Orochimaru appeared in a field of grass that was overlooked by a large mountain that if you looked closer you could see that it was actually a volcano. Naruto looked at Orochimaru and asked, "Sensei, where is this place where I'm getting my sword?" Orochimaru didn't respond immediately. Instead he pointed towards the volcano before saying, "It is in the heart of the volcano. But the fires are different than most volcanoes. The fires this one produces were originally set by the dragons of old. Rumor has it that one still exists in a chamber deep under the mountain, and he keeps the dragon forge burning with his great fire." Naruto was amazed, and hadn't realized how long he had been standing there until he saw Orochimaru start to walk toward the volcano and had to jog shortly to catch up to him. As they approached the base of the volcano, Naruto saw the faint outline of a door on the side of the mountain. Curious, Naruto asked, "Hey sensei, is that a door?" Orochimaru looked at Naruto and nodded, saying, "Yes, I cannot go beyond this point. You must make a decent-sized cut across the palm of your hand. Then place your hand in the middle of the circle on the door, and you shall enter into the room of judgment." This was where Anko was rejected. It analyzes your blood, your character, your ancestry, and your past difficulties. If it deems you worthy, you shall be taken into the next room, but if you are rejected, you shall be quite forcefully removed. "Do you wish to continue?" Naruto just nodded and made a large gash on the palm of his hand and then stuck it in the middle of the circle. In a flash of light he vanished into the volcano. Inside the room of judgment, Naruto looked around as he saw the sudden change in scenery. He now appeared to be floating above a lake of magma as a dark figure with crimson-slitted eyes stared at him. He knew whatever this being was, it was not Kyuubi. He continued to just stare into its eyes. Its gaze was a little unsettling, but he continued to just lock gazes with the enormous creature. Eventually, after what seemed like an eternity, the creature spoke in a deep and gravely voice, "You are chosen." After saying this, the creature faded from existence and Naruto suddenly found himself in another room. The room was massive and he seemed to be standing on some form of small island in the middle of an enormous lake of lava. Suddenly he seemed to lose temporary control of his body as he suddenly sat down in a meditation position. Suddenly he felt his chakra leaving him in large amounts and seemed to be absorbed into the magma. Along with his normal chakra, he saw wisps of red Kyuubi chakra go along with it and absorbed into the magma. As this was happening, some of the lava had begun to float in midair and began to collect, forming in the shape of a katana. As Naruto felt the tug on his chakra end, he saw the lava begin to solidify into a traditionally lengthened katana, while the handle guard looked like 9 golden fox tails that swirled together to look like the Uzumaki crest, and a cloth grip that looked like solid gold. The blade was the most magnificent shade of black that he had ever seen. It looked flawless, with an edge that looked like it could cut through anything like paper, and on each side of the blade was a magnificent and detailed Chinese-style dragon that looked to be made of the purest gold. He suddenly realized in his hand he was holding a sheath that was the same color as the blade with a gold trim to it. The blade floated over to the sheath and sheathed itself before both reappeared strapped to his back. Then suddenly his vision faded to black. But before he faded completely, he heard a deep, gravely voice say, "I am Shinryu." As Naruto began to come to his senses, the first thing he noticed was a white ceiling and the smell of rubber gloves. Naruto groaned as he realized that he was in the hospital. He hated hospitals. They always made him stay longer than he needed to. Their food was terrible, and worst of all, they didn't serve ramen. To Naruto, this was the biggest taboo in the world. To not have the noodly goodness that is ramen, to Naruto was a sin not even the most merciful being could forgive. As Naruto was pondering what method of escape he should use, the door opened and in stepped Orochimaru. Without saying a word, he tossed Shinryu at Naruto while it was still in its sheath. Naruto slowly drew the blade from its sheath. He gasped at how perfectly balanced it was. He stood up out of the hospital bed and swung it a couple of times, and when he accidentally cut through the bed railing, and he was amazed at how he felt almost no resistance. Orochimaru tossed a bundle of clothes at Naruto as he was only wearing a hospital gown. Then he stood up and walked out so Naruto could get dressed. After a couple minutes he walked back in and said, "You have been cleared to leave. We are going to training ground 44 and you will not leave until you have learned all you can about your new sword." Naruto nodded in understanding, and he finished putting on his hidden blades and strapped his sword to his back. 20 minutes later, in the Forest of Death, Orochimaru led Naruto into the middle of a clearing in the middle of the Forest of Death. "Naruto," Orochimaru spoke, "in order to fully grasp the abilities of your sword, you can't just sit down and meditate. In order to truly unlock a blade's true potential, these abilities must be discovered in the midst of battle. The Forest of Death is the best place for this, as the creatures are always trying to kill you but are not strong enough to do much harm. It is the perfect location for life or death combat training. You shall stay here in the Forest of Death for 1 month, but if you have not mastered the sword's abilities by then you will have to stay another 2 months, then another 4 months, and so on and so forth." Naruto nodded in understanding and said, "Yes, sensei, but how should I get started?" Orochimaru stated, "A good way to start is by channeling your chakra nature through the blade. Remember, this blade was created especially for you and will probably enhance some of your abilities. I shall be leaving now. Remember, you are not to leave training ground 44 until you have mastered your blade's abilities." Naruto nodded in understanding and then jumped off into the forest. 2 weeks later, Naruto was frustrated. 2 weeks and he still hadn't learned anything about his blade except that he could channel his wind chakra through it. And he could already do that with kunai and other weapons, so he felt like that didn't really count as an awesome special ability like his sensei said it would have. Naruto was angrily running through trees. He was so angry that he almost didn't sense the 4 chakra signatures that were nearby. He guessed that they couldn't be more than 50 meters away. Naruto decided to go investigate, hoping it might help him learn more about his blade. As he got to the clearing, he saw what appeared to be Genin team and their sensei, but the other thing he noticed was that they weren't from Konoha. On their foreheads was not a leaf insignia but of the hidden village of the rock. He quietly crouched on a branch overhead of them and listened in on their conversation. One of the what appeared to be Genin spoke. I can't believe we got such a lame mission. I mean, what kind of mission is hunting down a bunch of wet behind the ears genin for a team of chunin?" The Jonin spoke up. "Listen, you young fool, this is a mission of great importance that you should feel honored to have been chosen for. Your job is to first booby trap this forest so that it looks like Konoha is trying to gain an advantage over the other villages. And second is you 3 are to go and kill as many Konoha genin as possible so to cripple their future forces, as there are a lot of Konoha teams participating." The genin just sighed, stating, I know it's just killing a bunch of genin sounds rather underhanded, I mean, I always thought our village was above such tactics and that it was Konoha that did these things. The Jonin just shook his head. Listen, in the ninja world there is no honor. You are expected to do anything in your power to complete a mission, even if it means killing an innocent person. That is our duty as ninja. There is no sugarcoating it. As to survive, you must be willing to do the most deplorable acts imaginable. Do you understand? The genin just turned his head while looking disinterested, like he had heard that same story before. Right then they heard a snap. Up in the trees, Naruto cursed as being so careless as to let himself be heard. Without given much time, he found himself using his sword to block a kunai swipe from the Jonin. Naruto immediately jumped back away, only to duck due to a kunai thrown by one of the genin. Channeling wind chakra into his sword, he cut through a tanto used by one of the Iwa genin and straight through his neck. Seeing their teammate go down, they decided to try and double-team him. As they got nearer, they noticed that Naruto had begun doing seals. They were only about 2 feet away from him when he thrust his hands out, shouting, "Futon! Daitapa!" The 2 genin got shot away and were knocked unconscious when they crashed into a tree. Naruto was looking around for the Jonin as he had disappeared. Naruto knew the man hadn't ran away. Iwa Jonin were too prideful to be beaten by a Konoha civilian. Since he technically isn't a ninja yet, as he hasn't graduated from the academy. As he expected, the Jonin appeared out of the ground and slammed his hands into the ground while shouting, "Doden! Baraka Mountain no Noroi! Curse of the Black Mountain!" As he called out the name of the jutsu, massive spikes made from black earth rose from the ground to impale Naruto. Naruto knew he couldn't avoid it as it was too fast, so he poured as much chakra as he could into his attack and called out, "Shinra Tensai! Almighty push!" As he said it, a massive surge of gravity occurred as the entire forest around him for about a half-mile was completely leveled. Think of what pain did to Konoha, just not as large of a scale. In the middle of it stood Naruto, panting slightly. Grinning to himself, he looked around to try and find the remains of the Iwa Jonin. It would hopefully be his corpse. His hope was in vain as a spike of earth erupted from the ground and nearly pierced his chest. He managed to pull a substitution but still got a shallow wound on his left side. The rock Jonin appeared from out of the ground and saw that his earth spear had impaled a log. He looked around and thought, "Holy shit, if that attack had hit me I would have died. Who is this kid?" He looked around and was happy that he had hidden in the ground. He spun around just in time to block the kid's sword with a kunai, but had to jump back when he realized it was coated in wind chakra. Naruto was tired and slightly low on chakra from his last attack. He hoped that he could surprise the Jonin like he did the genin, Chunin. But no such luck as he jumped backwards. Though Naruto was surprised when a blade of wind chakra shot out of the blade, much to the surprise of Naruto and the Jonin. Naruto smiled as he saw it cut into the Jonin, but became disappointed as a puff of smoke revealed a log in his place. Naruto looked around to try and find the Jonin. As he was looking around, he detected a signature underneath him and jumped into the air, narrowly avoiding an uppercut from the Jonin. Channeling wind chakra into his blade again, he swung it, attempting to do the same thing he had done earlier in his battle. But instead, at the last minute, he felt the chakra shift from wind to something else, as a massive wave of fire erupted from the tip of his blade. The eyes of the Jonin widened in shock at seeing the massive firestorm. Naruto smiled as when it cleared he saw a clump of black remains. But before he could celebrate his victory, he saw the body crumble, signaling that it was a rock clone, and as he turned around he saw a massive boulder the size of an average-sized building coming straight at him. At that second he felt his Shinra Tensai return, and he thrust out his sword, channeled his chakra through his sword and shouted, "Shinra Tensai." As he released his jutsu, instead of a wide-ranged attack like it usually was, it was narrow and focused, and when it made contact with the boulder it plowed right through it, shattering it into many pieces. The Jonin's eyes widened at the incoming attack, as it was the reason that he became Jonin, as his other skills were only about high Jonin, but that jutsu had never failed to defeat his opponents in the past. The attack coming too fast for him to avoid, and he had been so confident in his last attack he hadn't bothered to prepare a substitution in case. The attack hit him and went straight through his stomach, and he collapsed to the ground in a pool of blood. Naruto was still standing there looking at his sword in awe. When his sensei had said it would be made specifically for him and him only, he didn't think it would be so custom made for him that it would amplify his existing abilities to such a degree. But the only thing he didn't understand is where the fire came from. He had a wind affinity, sure he would eventually be able to control them all, but due to fire being strong against wind, Orochimaru had guessed that would be the last one he would get. Naruto decided he should go refine the abilities he had discovered so far so he could do it on demand, instead of on accident. So he was about to go and continue his training session, but he suddenly collapsed in exhaustion. As he was laying there, he both hoped and didn't hope his sword had too much more to unlock, or at the rate he was going he would be stuck here for a year, and he was really starting to miss ramen as his supply had ran out a couple days ago. 2.5 months later, Naruto ended up having to stay a total of 3 months to finish mastering his blade. He had discovered that not just Shinra Tensei but all his Rinnegan abilities were enhanced by it. By putting it near or clashing blades with someone, he could drain their chakra. By swiping it through jutsu, he could take the chakra out of the ability. By focusing Shinra Tensei and Bansho Tenin, universal pull, the powers would be magnified and focused. He had learned how to summon the fire at will, and the part he thought was the coolest was that he didn't need hand signs to do it. He perfected his wind slash, which he named Fujin no Ha, blade of the wind god. He also learned that if he ever lost it, he could summon it back to his sheath at will. Using Bansho Tenin could bring it back to his hand, and using the minor snake contract, where he can't summon big snakes, just smaller ones like the ones used in Shadow Snake hands, he can have his snakes poison the blade, making a scratch into a fatal wound. But what Naruto was still curious about was where the fire was coming from. He learned he could make the fire much bigger by sending his wind chakra into it, but if used without the wind it required no chakra. This fact still puzzled Naruto. He stopped his thoughts as he neared the northmost gate of the Forest of Death. He saw a snake curled up by the entrance. Seeing it, he knew his sensei summoned it to watch the gate while he did other important things. He probably went out drinking with Jiraiya again. Maybe Jiraiya would give him some more scrolls on sealing, as he had just finished the last ones before he went into this Kami-forsaken forest. Rattling the gate a little bit to get the snake's attention, the snake looked up, then slithered over and through the chain link fence and opened his mouth impossibly wide, and Naruto climbed in. Think Jiraiya and the toads he climbed in and out of when he infiltrated a Megacure. After sitting inside the snake for about 15 minutes, he saw the snake open his mouth and he climbed out. Naruto looked around to take in his surroundings and saw that he was, as predicted, he found himself in the shinobi bar, the Dull Kanai. In front of him he saw Orochimaru and Jiraiya talking while drinking a particularly strong brand of sake. Naruto cleared his throat to get their attention. The two turned around in their bar stools to look at him. Orochimaru looked at him and noticed that Naruto's clothes were torn a little bit. "Naruto, do I have to up your training if the forest creatures were enough to injure you?" Naruto looked at Orochimaru and shook his head vigorously and responded, "No sensei, I fought an Iwa Jonin and 3 Chunin in the forest who were there to try and sabotage the second round of the Chunin exams." Orochimaru and Jiraiya looked at the kid and their eyes widened in shock. Jiraiya knew that since the war, Iwa was forced to promote some people to Jonin that weren't strong enough to be, just to keep up their appearance of strength, but still. Orochimaru looked at Naruto and asked, "What happened to the Iwa nins?" Naruto looked at his sensei and responded, "I decapitated one of the Chunin, the other 2 I knocked out but later died due to an empowered Shinra Tensei." Orochimaru nodded his head, knowing how deadly that technique was, and signaled for him to continue. Naruto continued, "And when I was fighting the Jonin I unlocked 3 of my sword's abilities. First I discovered was that it is capable of releasing a large blade of wind that can cut through most objects. Second, it is capable of releasing a large amount of fire without requiring chakra and only gets bigger when I channel my wind chakra into the attack. And I killed him with the third ability, as I can focus my Shinra Tensei through it to focus it and cause more damage. Using the third ability I launched it to stop his final attack, but after it shattered his attack it kept going and blasted a massive hole through his stomach. I only won through luck. If he had avoided my last attack I would probably be dead right now." Orochimaru and Jiraiya were stunned at what this sword could do, though both were wondering how the sword could produce fire without the application of chakra. Voicing their curiosity, Orochimaru spoke, "Naruto, do you know how the sword creates this fire?" Naruto shook his head, "No, but I do have a theory. When I use the fire, the dragons on the side of the blade turn red, And when the fire comes out it looks almost as if the fire is coming from their mouths. I'm not sure if that helps any, but it's all that I've come up with. Orochimaru nodded. He would have to talk with the snakes about it, but that would have to wait. As of right now he needed to train Naruto to properly use his sword and opposed to using revised kunai styles. Naruto, it's time for you to learn how to properly use your sword. Meet me at Training Ground 18 tomorrow at 0600 hours, 6 o'clock. Naruto nodded in understanding. He decided he'd go to Ichiraku and get some ramen, then head home to sleep in his own bed again. Naruto got to the training ground that he usually met his sensei at. When he got there he saw his sensei standing in the clearing along with the Hokage. Naruto looked to the two people and respectfully bowed while asking, "Sensei, why is Hokage Oji-san here?" The Sarutobi decided to speak first. "Naruto, you shall be attending the last year of the academy, so that you can find people that you can be placed in a team with and so you can make some friends your own age. Because right now none of the active shinobi would take you seriously." Naruto looked at the Hokage and said, "But Oji-san, I..." Orochimaru decided it was time for him to jump into the conversation. "Naruto, though you are capable of joining the shinobi force as you are, it is a matter of protocol, plus the council would throw a fit and probably have you removed from the ranks right after being accepted. By going through the academy and passing like the other students, it ensures that the council can't have you removed from the ranks no matter how much they may dislike you, the civilian half anyway." Naruto nodded in understanding as he knew that they didn't like him very much and would throw a fit when he became an official ninja. Naruto looked at his sensei and the old Hokage and asked, "When is my first day?" The Sandame looked at the young ninja and told him, "In 1 month you shall begin the academy. You are quite ahead of what they are doing, so please don't show off or injure your classmates." Naruto looked at the old man and responded, "Don't worry, Gigi, deception is the #1 tool of a ninja. I would have to be an orange-clad fool to show off everything I can do." Orochimaru looked down at his apprentice with pride that he had taken the lessons to heart and was applying them to his life. Time skip 1 month later, first day of the academy. Naruto was walking through the hallways on the way to the room he was told to attend. As he reached the room he knocked on the door. He heard a voice tell him it was okay to enter. When he walked in he saw many eyes staring at him curiously. He walked up to the teacher and handed him the slip that the Hokage had given him to give to the teacher. Iruka looked over the piece of paper and nodded as he had been told beforehand. He looked up from the sheet and spoke to the class. "Class, we are getting a new student joining us for the last year of the academy." At this there were several cries of protest, which were immediately silenced by Iruka, who used his giant head technique. At this the whole class became deathly silent and Iruka continued, "He gets to skip the first 3 years because he is an apprentice to one of our active shinobi." At this Naruto chuckled as he thought, "Orochimaru sensei is way above your average shinobi," but said nothing as Iruka continued. "I expect you all to treat him well and to not try to pick on him, am I understood?" "Yes, Iruka sensei," the class responded. Iruka nodded and continued, "Okay, now we are going to go to the training room to see your taijutsu skills and how they have improved over the summer." When they got to the dojo, Iruka began calling up names for people to fight. First was a pink-haired girl named Sakura. His immediate thought of her was useless and probably a fangirl, and a Hyuga girl named Hinata who was very timid but felt she could improve greatly if she could gain some confidence. When they got up, the discolored-haired girl immediately yelled out, "I'll win this for you, Sasuke-kun." Naruto shook his head as his assumption was confirmed and that the standards had fallen so low that a fangirl could get this far in the academy. When the teacher told them they could start, Naruto slapped himself in forehead when he saw Sakura's stance or lack of it. Her guard was so wide Panda could fit through it with space to spare, and the way she went about attacking her opponent was disgraceful since she just charged without even taking a moment to analyze her enemy, who outright charges a Hyuga in a taijutsu battle, thought Naruto. It was no wonder the Hyuga girl took her down in just a few seconds. The teacher proceeded to call names until he reached the last 2 people. "Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto, please come take your positions." After saying this, every guy in the room flinched as every girl, except Hinata, simultaneously squealed. After they got their hearing back, they took their positions. Sasuke decided to taunt his opponent a bit. "You should give up, no one can defeat an Uchiha." Naruto just took his stance, ignoring the arrogant remarks. And after a moment Iruka began the fight. They could hear the screaming of the rabid fangirls cheering on their idol. They both just stood there a moment each looking the opponent over. Then Sasuke charged. Naruto could tell that he was good judging by his form and speed. But he hadn't been trained by a Sannin. Right when Sasuke thought he was going to connect and end it with one punch, Naruto seemingly vanished and reappeared behind him and kicked him in the back, sending him sprawling along the ground in the arena. Sasuke growled while his cheer squad screamed his praises. He charged at Naruto again with a punch which was caught by Naruto. He then attempted to punch with his free fist only to find a knee driven into his solar plexus, forcing the air from his lungs and sending him sprawling and gasping for breath. Everyone was astonished. No one had ever beaten Sasuke before and Naruto had just done it almost without trying. Sasuke stood up angry and immediately charged Naruto again. Iruka yelled for him to stop, but he kept going. When he got to Naruto, Sasuke thought that he had taken Naruto by surprise when he suddenly found himself swinging at nothing but air. Sasuke and all of his fangirls glared at him and the girls began yelling how he cheated or how Sasuke must have let him win. Iruka, who was irritated at the blatant obsession and worship of the fangirls, marched up to Sasuke. He grabbed Sasuke by his shoulder and told him, "Sasuke, tell your little group to shut up as he won, and I can assure all of you he did not cheat." Sasuke scoffed at him and stated with his usual Uchiha-level superiority complex, "HN." Iruka sighed but turned back to the class and they finished up the taijutsu spar. Meanwhile, Naruto was just standing with a blank expression on his face watching the whole thing play out. After Iruka made Sasuke apologize for his actions to Naruto and the rest of his peers, they went back to the classroom for a lecture. After a couple of hours, lecture was done and they were told they could go home. Naruto went to one of the training grounds to train by himself as his sensei had just left for an important mission, so he wouldn't be back for a while. When Naruto had finished his warm-up and began training to increase his ease with his sword, he realized that ever since he got his sword he hadn't been contacted by the Kyuubi for more training in his Rinnegan. So he sat down and decided to meditate, which is what he did when he wanted to see Kyuubi without the fox calling him into his subconscious. When he finally got into his mindscape, which was unusually difficult, he walked through the various hallways until finally making it to the large sewer-like prison that contained the Kyuubi. When he approached the cell, he didn't see or hear anything, which was suspicious as the Kyuubi was not known for being shy. Since he wasn't stupid, he stopped a good distance from the cell bars and called out to the demon. But he didn't get a response. So he willed for a palm-sized rock to appear in his hand. 2. He threw it through the bars with the skill that only shinobi have. It flew straight until it hit something and hit the ground. Naruto then heard a growl and then a really loud yawn, then some shuffling that sounded like it was coming towards him. Naruto saw a vulpine snout, then two red eyes come out of the blackness and stared at him with a kind of drowsy look. The Kyuubi then yawned again, then looked at Naruto. "Kid, you better have a good reason for waking me up, or seal or no seal, I'm going to eat you." Naruto began to sweat a little bit before answering, Well, you hadn't contacted me for a long time, so I was getting curious to where you were. Since I haven't heard from you in about a year so." Naruto was cut when the Kyuubi began to yell. "What? I've been asleep for a year. What could have caused?" The large demon stopped mid-rant when he remembered. "That sword, that damn thing drained so much of my power when it was being created. I felt weaker than the Ichibi. I went to sleep to regain my power. Right now I'm up around the level of the Seven Tails, but why on earth did it demand so much power?" The Kyuubi thought about it for a minute before speaking. "Did anything unusual happen when the sword was being forged, and what does it do?" asked the Kyuubi. After a brief explanation on the abilities, Kyuubi was stunned at the abilities of the blade. The blade itself was stronger than any of the blades of the seven swordsmen of the mist. The Kyuubi was stunned at the potential the blade gave his container. After some thought on what he was going to do, he decided, "Kid, I'm going to re-establish our mental link since the one previously was lost after the forging of the sword, and after I am going to give you some chakra since I believe that when it was being forged it also took my chakra and it was absorbed into the blade, so when using my demon chakra there should be some kind of reaction." After the demon finished, Naruto found himself back outside his mind. A few seconds later he felt the demon chakra filling his coils. His Rinnegan turned from a pale purple to a fiery red, and the tiny pupil in the middle turned into a slit that extended from the top of his eye to the bottom. His canines lengthened, his hair turned even more spiky, and his whisker marks thickened. He looked behind him and saw a tail of chakra waving behind him. But he realized that he wasn't feeling the familiar feeling of hatred and rage that he had felt the few times before when using the chakra. He pulled out his sword to see if it had reacted to his chakra. When he pulled it out and looked at it, he saw that the golden dragons that had been along the side had changed to burning red foxes and that the whole blade was covered in the demon chakra. He decided he should try his flaming sword attack, 3, to see if anything changed. When he swung his sword and willed the wave of fire to come out, he got more than he had thought possible. Instead of a wall of flames, it was more of a tsunami that completely incinerated anything in its path. It kept going, then dispersed around 20 meters in front of him. 4. Naruto could only whistle at the destruction it caused. When he heard the familiar voice of the Kyuubi in his head. "How do you feel?" Naruto replied, "Strangely calm. I don't feel the normal feelings of hatred and rage that usually come with using your chakra. I feel like I usually do, calm and collected." The Kyuubi was silent for a moment before speaking up. "The sword must enhance your body and suppress the corruption my chakra causes. I will give you more chakra and tell me when you begin to feel the negative effects." Upon Kyuubi finishing his statement, Naruto felt even more chakra fill through his body. At 2 tails he started feeling like he wanted to punch someone or start a fight, but it was slight and easy to suppress. At the beginning of 3 tails the urge was greater. When he was at 3 and about to form a 4th is when he mentally yelled, "Stop." He immediately felt the chakra stop coming, but the 3 tails remained. 5. Very good, no training at all and already almost at 4 tails. That right there is something that no Jinchuriki before can say they accomplished. Well, for the ones that could even reach 4 tails. But very good, even though the swords helps you still, it's a great start. After his discussion with Kyuubi, Naruto decided to turn in early that day, since even though he wasn't all that physically tired, the mental strain he had was quite large that day and didn't feel like doing anything tiring that day. Time skipped day before graduations. The Hokage was sitting in front of his Jonin to see who was going to take on a genin team. There were many elites in front of him. Among some of them were Sharingan no Kakashi, Asuma Sarutobi, and the Genjutsu mistress Kurenai. He decided that everyone who was going to show up was there and decided to begin the team selections. As he was about to call the first Jonin forward to assign their team, a black blur burst through the open window. It stopped right in front of the Hokage and unfurled, revealing Orochimaru. The Hokage sighed as he said, "Well, at least I know who Anko learned how to make her entrances from. And what is it with you Sanins and your entrances? It's you with your bursting through windows, Jiraiya with his kabuki dance, and Tsunade with her blasting the doors off their hinges. Can't any of you enter like normal people?" he sighed. Orochimaru chuckled at his sensei's reaction to his entrance when he noticed the strange looks he was getting from the people in the room, so he decided he would announce his reasons for showing up. He suddenly took a very professional posture and stated, "Sensei, I would like to request a genin." Needless to say, everyone including the Hokage was quite shocked. This was because of the horrible fate that befell his last team many years ago. He had sworn never to take on another genin team, which was why Anko was never a part of one and was only his apprentice and filled in occasionally on missions but never had an actual team. The Hokage, being curious about his prized pupil's sudden change of heart, spoke up. "Orochimaru, not that I'm not happy about your sudden change of heart about taking a team, but my curiosity demands I ask why." The snake Sanin chuckled as he had expected this response from his old sensei. Decided to answer, "I merely saw 2 genin besides my apprentice who I believe could become quite powerful after an attitude adjustment." This suddenly made everyone curious on who he could be talking about. The Hokage then spoke up, "Well, Orochimaru, who is it you wish to select for your genin team?" After a long suspenseful pause, Orochimaru finally spoke, "I would like to request Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Hinata Hyuga." His request was followed by cries of protest from the other Jonin senseis who were complaining about an unbalanced team, among other things such as Kurenai, who wanted Hinata for her team. The aged leader then silenced everyone, then proceeded to speak. "Orochimaru, why did you choose these 3? If it is just because those 3 you like, I cannot condone it." Orochimaru chuckled and gave his answer, "Sensei, I would not select for such a frivolous manner," he said as he glanced at red-eyed Kurenai, who he knew was going to select Hinata due to her relationship with her in the past. He then continued, "I chose them because it would create a devastatingly balanced team. Hinata with her gentle fist, which is such a devastating style, will be the close range. Sasuke with his Sharingan and his Genjutsu and techniques he can copy will make a formidable long to mid-range fighter who can also fight close if he has to. Then add Naruto with his destructive Rinnegan Jutsu, high chakra reserves, and his already high skill in Kenjutsu makes a deadly mid-range fighter. Combine these three and their selective dojutsu and they make a team that could eventually rival the Sannin. The Hokage's eyes widened at this revelation, realizing how right his student was and that they nearly broke up a team that had so much potential. The whole room was quiet, with several Jonin wanting to argue, Kurenai, but could not find fault in the Sannin's logic. The Hokage decided that they should move on so that everyone would not stand around all day trying to come up with an argument to the Sannin's team. Hiruzen then coughed loudly, bringing everyone's eyes on him. Well, he started. Now that we have one team out of the way we can keep going with the selections. As he looked around the room noticing Kakashi had vanished since the one he wanted to train, Naruto, and the one he felt he needed to train, Sasuke, were both taken. He probably figured he didn't need to be there anymore. The chain smoker Asuma was first to come out of their dazed expressions and stated, I would like to request Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, and Yamanaka Ino for my team. It worked with their dads, why not them too? The Hokage nodded in approval and gestured for the next to come up. Kurenai decided to speak next and said, I would like Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, and Haruno Sakura. I feel a tracking and support-based team will be what they'll be best at. The Hokage nodded and gestured for the next sensei. The next few minutes were with the rest of the senseis choosing their teams. Once it was all over, they all went out to prepare the training fields for each of their selective team's second genin test. The next day had all our favorite future genin were sitting there all proud of themselves for passing the genin exam the day prior, and all had their headbands proudly tied on their foreheads, biceps, belts, etc. Iruka then walked into the classroom and quickly silenced everyone with his giant head jutsu and began to call off teams. Team 7 is Uchiha Sasuke. At this, every girl that had not yet been chosen, again other than Hinata, was sitting on the edge of their seats waiting to hear the next two results. Uzumaki Naruto. When he said this, Hinata began to silently pray to Kami that her name would be called to be placed on her crush's team. She was so busy praying with her fingers crossed that she almost didn't hear Iruka call out the final name. Hinata Hyuga, and you sensei shall be Orochimaru of the Sannin. When he said this, there was a large outcry of, what? In the room, where all the fangirls screamed at not having been placed on their precious Sasuke-kun's team. While Hinata was silently thanking whatever deity that had decided to listen to her pleas. Naruto was quite happy that a fangirl wasn't placed on the same team as him, but he didn't know too much about Hinata other than was quite shy and would turn quite red and stutter a lot when he tried to talk to her, which he found kind of strange, and would often ask if she was sick and feel her forehead only for her to pass out. 6. Sasuke on the other hand was mentally cheering, yes. No fangirls. And since both possess bloodlines themselves, and while I'm jealous of Naruto's power, at least I won't have teammates who will just slow me down, and having a Sannin as a sensei should give me enough power to defeat him. Iruka was quick to regain order in his classroom and proceeded to read of the rest of the team's team aid shall be Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, and Haruno Sakura. Your sensei shall be Kurenai Yuhi. There were two loud thuds as Kiba's and Sakura's heads hit their desks, as neither liked each other at all, Kiba not liking Sakura since she hurt his and Akamaru's sensitive ears. And Sakura not liking Kiba since she thinks she smells like wet dog and kibbles. Iruka then continued, and since Team 9 is still in circulation from last year, Team 10 is Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, and Yamanaka Ino. It has been a pleasure to teach each and every one of you. Your new senseis will be here to pick you up soon. Everyone was patiently waiting as senseis came and got their students. Then a black object burst through the window, shattering it and landing in the middle of the classroom. It unfurled to show a man with long black hair, snake-like eyes, and lanky but agile-looking form. Naruto just rolled his eyes at his senseis over the top entrance. Orochimaru looked around and announced, Team 7, meet me on the top of the building in 5 minutes or you'll be finding snakes in your bed for the next month. After he said this, he dissolved into snakes, which then slithered out the door. Naruto just rolled his eyes at his sensei and vanished in a leaf shunshin. When Hinata and Sasuke got to the roof, they found Naruto and their new sensei sitting there quietly waiting for them to show up. When they sat, Orochimaru spoke up, Alright, let's introduce ourselves. Likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future. I'll go first. I like snakes and training. I don't like sour things and the smut my teammate takes part in and writes. I like learning new jutsu. And my dream is to find a way to become immortal. Okay, pale eyes, your turn. Hinata looked a bit nervous but answered anyway. And my name is Hyuga Hinata. I like F-flowers, cinnamon rolls, and... She blushed while subtly glancing at her blonde teammate, then continued. I don't like my F family's caged bee bird seal, and my D dream is T to unite the T2 branches. Orochimaru then looked at Sasuke then said, you next broody. Scowling at the nickname he began nonetheless, my name's Uchiha Sasuke. I don't like many things. And I dislike a lot of things. My hobbies are training, and my dream. No, I won't call it a dream, it's more of an ambition cause it will happen. I will kill a certain someone and bring back my clan. Orochimaru then though over his two new students. I have an Avenger and a shy Hyuga. Hopefully it won't take too long to turn their personalities around, but now to hear my apprentice's intro. He then turned and nodded to his apprentice telling him to go ahead. He began, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, I like ramen, training, and my sword. I don't like people who judge others without first getting to know them and the time it takes to cook ramen. My hobbies are learning more about my bloodline and swords, watering my plants, and trying new flavors of ramen. 7. My dream is to become the most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations. Orochimaru nodded in approval of his new students then spoke. Alright, meet me at training ground 7 tomorrow at 8 for your real genin exam. They all looked at him curiously then Hinata spoke. But Sensei we already took the genin E exam. He chuckled before saying, if you thought using such pathetic E-rank ninjutsu and a written test was all it took to become ninja, we would have a lot more genin deaths than we already have. Anyone could pass that exam. The test is just to figure out who is absolutely hopeless. This next test has a 66% fail rate, meaning of the 9 teams that were made only 3 will enter active duty, the others will be sent back to the academy for another year of training, or if their sensei sees fit dropped from the shinobi program entirely. The 3 dojutsu-wielding kids all looked at their sensei in shock and Naruto with a bit of frustration since this was the first he was hearing of this. At this the snake Sanin vanished in a shunshin, leaving 3 conflicted kids on the roof. The new Team 7 can now be found sitting under a tree waiting for their sensei to show up. They didn't have to wait long since in puff of smoke their snake-like sensei arrived. Alright Gakis, for your genin test you have to steal these bells from me. Whoever doesn't get a bell will be tied to that post, as he gestures to 3 posts all stuck into the ground, and will be promptly sent back to the academy for another year of training. As he held up 2 bells. 1. They looked at him curiously, all noticing the lack of a 3rd bell, but it was surprisingly the prince brooder Sasuke himself who decided to voice the team's thoughts. But sensei, there are only 2 bells, where's the 3rd one? The pale Sanin chuckled and responded with, well, I do seem to have only 2 bells. It seems one of you is going back to the academy regardless. Kukuku. They all had a look of astonishment on their faces, but if one looked closely you could see a glint in the eye of a particular dense spiky blonde-haired genin who realized he already knew the secret to this test. A few moments later Orochimaru set a timer on a stump and then spoke, you have till noon to take these bells from me. As he tied then to a belt loop on his pants, now go. Mere seconds after he gave them the okay to go, they were completely out of sight and a lesser ninja would have lost them entirely, but he wasn't a Sanin for nothing as his sensing abilities were rather skilled. Even for not being a sensor-type shinobi, he could detect his apprentice's strong chakra signal moving towards the other 2 smaller ones who were hiding. He mentally cursed as he wondered how he figured out the meaning so quickly. He then mentally cursed, damn you Jiraiya, you must have told him the story of when we took this same test. Damn it. But he had already began the test and he knew he wasn't allowed to change it, but after thinking back on it he realized they would have passed anyway, probably, so he'd let it slide, but he'd make sure to have a few choice words with Jiraiya the next time he saw him. With Naruto, he ran through the woods looking for Hinata, who he knew would be the easiest to convince to team up, and he could only hope that the 2 of them could get through the Uchiha's thick skull to get him to understand the only way they are going to pass is to work together. He dropped behind her and tapped her on the shoulder, only to have to avoid a Jukin strike, but when she saw who it was immediately blushed and stuttered out an apology. He waved his hands in dismissal, knowing she probably felt bad, and then spoke, Hinata, we need to work together in order to pass. As he said those words, Hinata began creating a new color of red on her face with how much she was blushing. He needs me, she thought excitedly. As Naruto continued, my godfather Jiraiya had this same test when he was a genin and he told me the only way to pass is to work as a team. When she heard this, Hinata deflated a little bit but was still happy that Naruto came to her first. They then dashed off to find Sasuke and hope that they'll be able to get through his thick ego. They found Sasuke quickly with help from Hinata's Byakugan. They found him hiding in a tree near a clearing where their sensei was just sitting there meditating. Naruto tapped him on the shoulder only to have to bend backwards at an angle that for a normal person would be considered impossible. When Sasuke saw who it was, he put his kunai away and asked gruffly, "What are you two doing here? I don't need your help to get a bell." Naruto sighed expecting this but proceeded to tell Sasuke, "We need to work together to pass the two bells or a trick to split us up. This is the same test that Sensei and his teammates had back when they were, and my godfather Ero Sennin told me stories of when they took the test and how they discovered the secret to passing, and it was to work as a team and later became famous ninja known for their incredible skill and teamwork." Sasuke absorbed the information and decided to weigh his odds and decided that his odds against a Sannin alone was pretty slim. Even people with a god complex admit that fighting any of the Sannin is no easy feat, especially one known to be the strongest of the three. He nodded and gestured for Naruto to continue. Naruto obliged and said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Back with Orochimaru. Orochimaru was just sitting in the clearing meditating while waiting for his new students to make the first move. It had been a while and they still hadn't made their move. While most new teachers would then get up and start looking for them, he just smiled, knowing that taking longer but being more efficient is better than going fast and having a possible error. Orochimaru knew that even if Naruto hadn't already known what the test was about, would have been able to figure it out quite easily, but that still didn't mean he was any less cross at his peaking teammate any less. He was then interrupted from his thoughts as he found kunai coming at him from 3 different directions. 3 blurs then launched from the different points around the forest and attempted to assault him. He had to be very careful of his pale-eyed student since even a tap from her could do serious damage. He then noticed Sasuke jump back and start going through hand seals, then said, "Kaden, great fireball jutsu." As he finished the name of his technique, a medium-sized ball of fire came from his mouth and rushed at Orochimaru. He noticed that his 2 other students had substituted away, leaving logs with exploding tags in their place. Orochimaru realized that they had planned this maneuver and executed it perfectly as he did a quick shunshin away from the colliding balls of destruction. The 3 genin hopefuls then jumped from where they were to each other. "Did we get him?" asked Hinata. Naruto responded, "I seriously doubt it. Sensei is a Sannin, you know he wouldn't let something like that hit him, but that leaves the question, where is he?" As he said that, snakes shot from the trees faster than they could follow and proceeded to wrap up Sasuke and Hinata while Naruto was just barely able to blow them away with a Shinra Tensei. He had just drawn his sword to cut his teammates loose when he suddenly noticed a glint of steel out of the corner of his eye and quickly spun around and clashed blades with his sensei. The older and more experienced shinobi won and Naruto had to jump back. He knew his sensei was holding back a lot or else he would be dead and never would have had time to see the glint of his sword's blade. He jumped away while doing some hand seals, then spun and launched the attack at his 2 tied-up teammates and yelled, "Futon, Windcutter." He didn't put near as much chakra into it as he normally would have, but he was trying to save his friends, not turn them into deli meat, so he only put enough chakra in the attack to hurt the snakes so they would release them by forcing them to return to their home. Orochimaru looked at his apprentice and smiled in pride as he could tell he had taken his teachings and the teachings of all the past Hokages to heart. As he was thinking this, he heard the timer he had set go off. As the 3 young children sat in front of them and asked them, "Although I assume Naruto already told you the meaning of this test, I'm going to ask anyways, do you know what the secret to passing the bell test is?" Sasuke decided to answer, "Teamwork," he answered, since he had thought more about it as they had been going through. The point of the bells was to separate us and try to make us compete for them, but the way you pass is seeing beyond that and working together. Orochimaru smiled as he could already see a change in Sasuke's behavior. He looked over at his other 2 bloodline holding students and saw determination to do well shining in their uniquely colored eyes. He knew they were going to become a team to rival any other and perhaps take the banister as the next 3 legendary ninja. Later that day, Sasuke Sasuke was returning back to his compound after his passing his second genin test. He was happy and also strangely happy with his team. When he first heard they would be placed on teams, he had thought that teammates would only slow him down. But he was noticing that they were actually helping him do better. The plan of attack they had thought of during the test was something that he wouldn't have been able to come up with alone. And when Orochimaru had tied him and Hinata up with snakes, it was Naruto who freed them, and he was shocked to realize it felt nice knowing you had people there you could trust to watch your back. As he got closer to his compound, a thought crossed his mind that he never thought he would ever in a million years think, maybe they could help me deal with him. Later that day, Hinata. She walked home timidly, walking through the gates and past the branch member guards. She then approached the main building where the clan head and his family live, and she entered the building and was about to head towards the gardens in the back when she heard a stern voice behind her. "Hinata," her father called out, "come here at once, I must talk with you." She quietly made her way over to her father's nearby office and took a seat on one of the large and comfortable chairs that were in front of his desk for when there were important visitors over. She squirmed slightly under his intense stare until he finally spoke. "So I hear that you passed your second genin test, is this true?" he asked. "Why yes, to-sama, it is," she answered. He responded, "Good, be sure you do not do anything to dirty our clan's reputation. Orochimaru is a powerful shinobi, be sure to learn from him well, Hinata." "Hi, to-sama," she responded. He nodded to her and dismissed her. She nodded and left the room quietly. With Naruto decided to just go back to his apartment. Having nothing else to do, he went home and made himself a quick dinner of some leftover sushi he had in his fridge from the other day. Afterwards he went to sleep early so that he would have more energy for the next day's team training. Once he fell asleep, he found himself in front of a similar cage. Groaning since he didn't want to talk to Fuzzy Wuzzy and just wanted to rest. So he yelled, "Yo Fuzzball, why'd you call me here? I'm trying to sleep." He saw the Kyuubi come into view before he spoke. "I thought you wanted to know more about your Rinnegan, but I guess I was wrong, goodbye then." Naruto's eyes widened at this and immediately called out, Wait, I do want to learn more." The Kyuubi chuckled before speaking, "I thought you might have a change in heart. As I was saying, you currently possess 3 of the 6 main paths of the Rinnegan. The first one you unlocked was the Diva path, which allows you to use your gravity techniques. Next you unlocked your Animal path, which allows you to summon all forms of creatures and animals. And last you have unlocked the Preta path, which allows you to absorb an infinite amount of chakra. The next one I believe you will develop is called the Asura path, which allows the user to summon mechanized armor to enhance them in battle and allows you to augment your body with extra limbs and various robotic weaponry. 2. I shall not reveal to you the others just yet, as you are not even close to unlocking them. The last 2 are quite difficult." Naruto groaned in disappointment, wanting to everything he could about his bloodline, but he knew the Kyuubi wouldn't budge since it never had in the past. After their talk, the Kyuubi let Naruto's mind go to slumberland. We find our heroes hiding out in various trees scattered around a clearing. They have their chakra signatures suppressed so that their target couldn't detect them. When suddenly their wireless communicators blazed to life. "This is Ring Eye, I'm in position, there is no sign of the target, over," said our favorite blonde-haired shinobi. This is Tenchi, I also can't see the T target." The Hyuga heiress blushed since her nickname was Angel. "This is Raven, I have a visual on the target, requesting permission to engage," requested Sasuke. "Raven, this is Snake, begin your assault, Ring Eye and Tenchi are moving to support you." Sasuke nodded in his tree and dropped down in front of the target. When it saw the raven-haired Avenger, the target immediately shot off in the other direction. But before it got far, Hinata dropped down in front of them. The target was quivering, but as Sasuke got close, suddenly lashed out, scratching him deeply across his face, and quickly ran around him. The target thought they were in the clear when he felt a force pull him back and saw their blonde-haired teammate with his arm outstretched towards him. Naruto caught the beast by the scruff on its neck so that the little demon couldn't turn him into deli meat like it did to his raven-haired teammate's face. Their sensei suddenly dropped down and turned to the blonde. "Is it the target?" Naruto took a close look at the feline in his hand before turning to his sensei, red bow in the left ear. "This is definitely Tora." A little while later they were standing in the Hokage's office with the demon cat firmly in Naruto clutches. They then handed it to the daimyo's wife, who proceeded to pull the cat into a bone-crushing hug. Everyone felt kind of sorry for the abused feline. Well, everyone except for Sasuke, who was chuckling after seeing the cat's insides turned to paste since it had mutilated his face. After the large woman had left with the little cat in her arms, Team 7 turned back to the Hokage. Sarutobi then looked back at the team who was still standing there expecting another mission. He picked up a stack of papers on his desk and started shifting through them before he pulled out a folder that said D rank on them. He then looked into the folder before turning back to the young genin and Sannin standing in front of him. Let's see, we have a few gardening missions. An old lady needs you to pick up some groceries for her, and let's see. Suddenly there was a loud crash and a shout of, Tora no come back. Everyone in the room sweat dropped as they heard this as the aged Hokage continued to speak. Or you can catch Tora again. Naruto, whose eye had been twitching the whole time, suddenly yelled out, no. No more chores. Those aren't missions that shinobi are needed for. Civilians could do those jobs, old man, give us something better. Hiruzen looked at the young Uzumaki's teammates who he saw nod in agreement. Orochimaru sighed as his apprentice could still be quite expressive despite all the emotional conditioning that Orochimaru had put him through. Sarutobi sighed before shouting, you can come in now. As he said this, an aged man came through the door. The Hokage continued, Team 7, this is your mission. You must escort Tazuna here back to his home and protect him as he finishes building his bridge. The old man, now revealed to be Tazuna, looked over at the new squad and frowned before turning back to the Hokage. I ask for protection and this is what you give me. 3 wet behind the ears kids and a man who looks, well, creepy. Hiruzen was about to protest, but his face suddenly lit up as if remembering something. Orochimaru, I almost forgot. Jiraiya sent me a message a couple of hours ago saying he needs your help infiltrating a base undetected. I advise you leave as soon as possible. I've already arranged for someone to take over your team in your absence. The snake Sannin nodded and vanished in Shunshin. Naruto, who was now wide-eyed, looked at the aged man in front of him in shock. What, sensei isn't even going to go on our first C-rank mission with us, and what do you mean by having someone take over as our sensei? 1. Suddenly a spiky silver-haired man poked his head through the window. You requested me, Hokage-sama? Ah, Kakashi, I'm glad you arrived and right on time too. The aged Sarutobi said the last mart with a grin, seeing the puzzled look in his eye. I don't understand, Kakashi asked, puzzled. I thought I was late? Hiruzen chuckled at the elite Jonin's puzzled look. Yes, but I knew you'd be late, so I told you to be here 2 hours ago. The silver-haired man glared at his aged leader before turning to the young genin team that would be taking on a mission and nearly had a stroke when he saw our favorite blonde genin. He looks just like Minato-sensei, Kakashi thought to himself. He then gave the young team his trademark eye smile before bringing his favorite orange book to his face once again. Everyone who knew him previously, including all the hidden Anbu, sweat dropped at the sight while the genin just looked at him confused. The Hokage sighed while he shook his head before turning to address the young Dujutsu-wielding shinobi. This is Kakashi Hitaki. He will be your substitute sensei for whenever Orochimaru is called away on other missions. Kakashi gave them a small wave and an eye smile before letting Hiruzen continue. He will be the Jonin leader on this mission. Tazuna chose this moment to open his slightly drunk mouth. Wait, I ask for protection and you give me a scarecrow and 3 milk-drinking kids? He would have kept going if it weren't for the fact that he suddenly found himself pinned to the wall by senbon needles stabbing into his clothing courtesy of Naruto's senbon launchers. Tazuna sweated a bit at the glare the 3 young shinobi were giving him. The aged leader sighed, taking deep inhale of his pipe before speaking to the young teens. Would you please free the client? It is not good for mission success if you try to kill the person you're being paid to protect. The 3 teammates looked down in slight shame before they went and removed their charge from the wall where he was pinned. They then lined up in front of the Hokage facing their substitute sensei who had moved in front of the Hokage's desk. Alright team, meet at the gate in 1 hour, bring enough supplies to last you the week. But don't weigh yourself down with too much gear, spoke the masked nin. Team 7 released a chorus of, hi, before vanishing to get their equipment from their respective houses. They met up at the gate with Tazuna and then left for Wave Country, though no one noticed how nervous Tazuna looked as they left. Few hours later, Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata were all discussing their relative Dujutsu, and Kakashi and Tazuna were walking in silence. As they were watching, they saw a puddle in the distance. They all looked at each other, then began speaking in whispers. "Do you see the puddle too?" asked Sasuke. "Yeah, but it hasn't rained in weeks. Hinata, can you check it with your Byakugan?" The pale-eyed heiress nodded her head before silently activating her Kake Genkai. She gasped as she saw two figures in the puddle that appeared to be around Chunin level. After revealing the information to her male counterparts, they looked at their substitute senseis silently asking him if he saw them. Kakashi nodded slightly, letting them know he saw them too. They all nodded while preparing themselves for an attack. Sure enough, right as they passed the puddle, two figures emerged from the puddle and proceeded to wrap a spiked chain around Kakashi as they pulled it, ripping him apart. Sasuke and Naruto proceeded to throw kunai at the duo, which caught their chain, pinning it to a tree. Before one of them could release his chain, Hinata appeared in front of him, unleashing a fury of Jukin strikes, making him unable to move and slump over. 2. Hinata immediately jumped away, seeing with her Byakugan that his partner had lunged at her with one of his clawed gauntlets. Naruto jumped between them, blocking the claw with his katana. The remaining assailant attempted to lash out at our blonde hero with his other claw, but suddenly was forced back when Naruto's foot found itself in his gut. Getting his wind back, he saw the last of the genin trio finishing up some hand signs and immediately thought, "Shit," when he saw that he had finished on the Tora hand sign. Sasuke inhaled deeply before yelling out, "Kaden! Great fireball jutsu!" He exhaled and a medium-sized fireball came out, though still impressive for someone so young, and slammed into the missing nin, who was sent flying backward, slamming into a tree with multiple burn marks all over his body. Kakashi then decided to reappeared and pull out a spool of ninja wire and proceed to tie the Kiri nuke nin to a tree. He then turned around to see a slightly irritated genin team. It was Naruto who spoke. "Sensei, why did you not help us with the two dangerous nuke nin?" The masked Jonin rubbed the back of his head sheepishly before replying, "I wanted to see how skilled you were and how you would react in a life-or-death situation, especially since you're not my team. But I must say I'm quite impressed. I didn't learn as much as I wanted to since you dispatched them so quickly." The three genin seemingly accepted his answer and fell back into position. Kakashi then turned towards Tazuna, who suddenly found his shoes quite fascinating. Kakashi spoke with a strong tone that reflected his ex-Anbu captain status. "Why is it we encountered enemy nin on a mission that was supposed to be C rank? Normally this type of mission is at least a B rank, and if we encounter a Jonin, which I suspect we will, then it could even turn into an A- rank. Tell me one good reason why we shouldn't abandon this mission and return home right now?" Tazuna's eyes widened at the last part. Not wanting the ninja to leave, immediately broke into a sob story how his country didn't have enough money to afford a higher ranked mission, and how if they left then his wife and grandchild would forever blame the Leaf Ninja, and how his grandson would cry over his death. Needless to say, the four shinobi ignored him for the most part, not really caring, but that did not mean they wanted to back down. The recent events only inspired them to want to take this mission even more, for Naruto and Sasuke to see how well they could do against a serious opponent, while for Hinata she was thinking about how doing a high-class mission as a genin might get her father and her clan to see her as more than a failure. Kakashi then turned to his temporary students and asked, "Let's vote on it then. We will continue this mission if you think you are ready for it." They looked at him with only confidence and determination. Well, Hinata was a little nervous. Orochimaru was helping her with that and she had made good progress, but it was still there. But it was Naruto who spoke. "We need to do this, sensei, if not for the old man here then to see how far we've come in our training." His ringed eyes oozing confidence. Kakashi nodded, looking at his other two charges to see if they shared this view, only to see them nod in agreement. He sighed as he suspected the mission would probably escalate, but knew that he couldn't change their minds, so he proceeded to turn and gesture for Tazuna to continue leading them on their way to his home. The aged bridge builder's eyes watered and proceeded to tell them of his thanks over and over before finally continuing on their way to Wave Country. Several hours later, they made it to a shore where they saw an old man waiting for them with a small boat that looked like it was probably used for fishing. They all climbed in and the aged man proceeded to row them across the river. When they got to the other side, Tazuna gave the man a quick thanks before the fisherman pushed off and disappeared into the fog. They had been walking for a while and it had been thus far uneventful. Tazuna saw this and the quiet as a good sign that they would be able to make it without another incident. But the shinobi knew better. They hadn't heard any sounds of wildlife in a while, which was a sign that they were probably being watched, and the fact that the fog was getting even thicker was not helping them at all. Hinata activated her Byakugan and taking a look around. She saw a rather large signature vanish right out of her range before she could get a good look at it. She relayed this information to her sensei, who nodded and whispered for her to activate her Byakugan every minute or so in case they returned. A few minutes later, when she was doing one of her sweeps of the area, she saw something coming towards them. Quickly identifying the object as a ridiculously large blade, immediately yelled, "Everyone get down." Everyone lunged for the ground, Kakashi pulling Tazuna down with him to make sure he didn't lose his head since he didn't have near the same speed as the rest of them. The large cleaver-like blade continued flying till it got stuck in a tree, where a masked man proceeded to jump on top of the large blade. He was wearing camo-styled pants, was shirtless, and had a white bandana-shaped cloth draped over his mouth and nose. He spoke in a deep and threatening voice. Well, what do we have here? A few wet behind the ears genin and the copycat nin Kakashi. Well, this is a pleasant surprise to say the least. How about you give me the bridge builder and I won't have to kill all of you? Kakashi responded while pulling out a kunai. Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist, why am I not surprised by you showing up? But we won't surrender to Zuna-san, so I shall have to defeat you in combat myself, murdering demon. Once he finished his statement, him and his temporary students took their personal stances. Sasuke with his Uchiha intercept style and with his fireball techniques, hand signs going through his mind in preparation. Hinata fell into her improvised Gyuukin, which Orochimaru had helped her alter to fit her body's natural flexibility. And Naruto into the snake style, which Orochimaru had taught him. Zabuza chuckled at the display of bravado from the young genin and their Jonin sensei. He went through some hand signs before announcing Kirigakure Sojutsu. As he finished calling out the name of the technique, a thick mist rolled in, preventing them from seeing more than a foot in any direction. Hinata immediately activated her Byakugan, which helped, but was shocked to find that the technique limited her range more than not being there. She quickly surmised that it was due to the chakra that filled the mist, causing it to hinder her vision, but was still better than not having it at all. Naruto flipped through hand seals before shouting out, "Futon, great breakthrough." Wind gushed out and blew the mist away from them, but it was short-lived as Zabuza just pumped more chakra into the technique and the mist just came back as strong as ever. Naruto grimaced as he knew that it took him more chakra to get rid of the mist than it took Zabuza to bring it back, and due to the already small amount of chakra necessary to cast the technique, especially given their surroundings, he knew it was not worth wasting the energy trying to rid the area of the technique, at least not until Zabuza used up more of his chakra. Kakashi took up a defensive stance while holding his kunai ready. He reached out with all of his senses, hoping to hear or smell Zabuza. Meanwhile, the genin withstood the battery that was the swordsman's killing intent. While they were not as affected as they would have been due to Orochimaru drilling them with his own, Sasuke and Hinata still were a bit scared due to them not having as much training as Naruto. But they hid it well and sucked it up and maintained their defensive stances. Zabuza was mildly impressed at the young shinobi. Some Chunin couldn't even stand his killing intent. He felt he should try taking it up a notch to see if they could still keep their cool. 8 places: lungs, heart, kidneys, clavicle artery, brain, throat, liver, and throat. So many choices, but I can only choose one for each. Such a difficult decision. The genin shivered a bit at the killing intent-laced words, but still managed to stay strong and remain in their stances. All was quiet for several moments before Hinata's eyes widened, since she saw Zabuza right in front of Naruto swinging his blade horizontally at him. Naruto's eyes widened and immediately brought his own blade to guard. The blades clashed in a shower of sparks. The two swordsmen were clashing, but Naruto was barely able to withstand Zabuza's strength. Luckily, it didn't last long, since Kakashi appeared behind Zabuza and stabbed him in the back with a kunai. But instead of blood, water came out and the Zabuza dissolved into water, revealing it to be a water clone. A shadow appeared behind Kakashi and sliced him in half, only for a puddle of water to form, revealing Kakashi to be a water clone as well. The real Kakashi then appeared behind Zabuza and put a kunai to his throat. "This is over, Zabuza, you have lost." Zabuza chuckled before saying, "Most impressive, Kakashi, even in this mist you were able to counter my technique, but it still is not enough for you to win." As he said that, he dissolved into water, revealing itself as another water clone. Kakashi spun around quickly, only to be kicked in the stomach and sent flying into the water. The second he landed, he sensed something off about the water. This water is too heavy. His eyes widened in realization, but it was already too late as he heard Zabuza call out, "Sweden, water entrapment jutsu." He was pulled into a ball of highly condensed water where he could barely move his fingers. The young students of Orochimaru eyes widened when they saw their Jonin commander trapped in a bubble of water. Zabuza smirked and formed a hand sign, and a water clone rose up in front of him and stepped out onto shore. The young teens took up positions. Sasuke and Naruto started going through hand signs before shouting Kaden, Fireball Jutsu, Futon, Great Breakthrough. The two techniques combined and formed a massive firestorm which evaporated the clone and would have singed Zabuza's eyebrows if he had any. Knowing it was only a matter of time before Zabuza ran out of breath, Naruto stretched his hand out before calling out one of his favorite techniques, Shinra Tensai. Zabuza suddenly felt as if gravity began to pull him backwards and away from his jutsu, effectively ending it. Kakashi fell onto the water, keeping himself up with chakra, which had become second nature for a man of his caliber. He coughed a few times before he got his breath back and proceeded to stand back up and face Zabuza, who was picking himself up after being tossed through the air like a rag doll. Growling angrily, not knowing what force threw him, he redrew his massive cleaver blade and turned to face Kakashi. What happened next made the genin almost think that there was a mirror or something between the two, since they were going through the exact same seals right in time with each other before they simultaneously called out the name of the technique, Sweden, Water Dragon Jutsu. As they finished, two massive water dragons rose from the water and slammed into each other before destabilizing and falling back into the rest of the water. They then proceeded to do almost the same thing, but this time called out, Sweden, Great Waterfall Jutsu. As two large spouts of water shot out and again cancelled each other out. Zabuza's imaginary eyebrows furrowed in frustration as he thought, what is he doing? Is he reading my mind? Kakashi finished for him as Zabuza's eyes widened before furrowing again before calling out, I won't be beaten, as Kakashi also joined in, by a copycat monkey. They began going through hand seals again, but Kakashi finished his first before yelling out, Sweden, Great Waterfall Jutsu. The resulting water spout slammed Zabuza into a tree where Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke took advantage of his prone figure and pinned him to the tree with kunai. As Kakashi approached the downed mist ninja, he heard him call out weakly, Can you see the future? Kakashi looked down with a careless glance while pulling out a kunai and saying, Yes, and I predict your future is death. But before anyone could do anything, a couple senbon flew through the air before hitting Zabuza in his neck as he slumped over. A voice drew their attention. Thank you, I have been tracking him for quite a while but couldn't bring him down. Thank you for your assistance, as he knelt down next the body and put his hands on it before vanishing in a mist shunshin. Kakashi turned towards the team before he collapsed face first into the earth. The team had arrived at Tazuna's home an hour or so later, and after meeting his daughter Tsunami and his grandson Inari, they put Kakashi into one of the extra beds there. Kakashi woke up the next day but was still too weak to get up out of bed, so he called up his temporary students upstairs. There's something I need to tell you, Kakashi said to the group as they sat in chairs at the foot of his bed. I believe that Zabuza is still alive. When he said that, they just kind of looked at him with a no-kidding look before Naruto decided to tell their sensei, we came to that conclusion yesterday while you were knocked out. Sasuke decided to give him some more detail on the subject. After we settled into the house, we discussed everything that occurred, and when we got to the part where the hunter Nin took Zabuza's body, we realized that he didn't decapitate the body first. Kakashi nodded, very impressed at their ability to look underneath the underneath. Kakashi sat up in bed and asked his Dujutsu-wielding trio if they all had something to train in. Seeing them nod, he laid back down to get some more rest. It was a couple of hours later and the three students of Orochimaru were busy training in their respective specialties. Naruto was busy practicing his kenjutsu with a clone, Hinata was going through sets for her new gentle fist style, and Sasuke was trying to learn how to put people in a genjutsu through eye contact alone. As they were training, a set of eyes looked out of the darkness of the forest and stared at the three training ninja. The stalker suddenly found himself lifted up by a hand grabbing the back of his shirt. Inari turned his head and saw the ringed eyes of Naruto staring back at him. What are you doing here, Gaki? This is no place for kids, you could be hurt, said the blonde Jinchuriki to the boy with emo tendencies that could rival Sasuke's right after his family was killed. The young boy glared at Naruto before yelling, "What do you think you're doing? Nobody can beat Gato," before running off towards Tazuna's house. The three genin looked at each other for a second before shrugging and going back to their training. 3 days later, the four ninja were sitting having dinner with Tazuna and his family. They had just come back in from training, Kakashi helping Sasuke with his genjutsu, Hinata with her strength and agility, and Naruto with his chakra control. Dinner was relatively quiet, everyone content to eat in silence, but that silence was soon disrupted by an infuriated Inari. "Why do you all keep trying? You can't beat Gato." The four shinobi all looked up at him with a "are you kidding me" type look before it was Sasuke that spoke. "Kid Gato is a fat businessman. I'd be surprised if he was even able to hold a sword, let alone use one." This only seemed to make Inari even madder. "You all just talk, with your peaceful village. I doubt any of you even know what suffering is." He was suddenly silenced by killing intent being directed at him by all four ninja before he found himself slammed into the far wall by an invisible force before seeing Naruto use his powers to float over the table and then appear right in front of him. Slamming his hand into the wall only centimeters from Inari's head. Shaking in fear, he looked up into the rage-filled eyes of Naruto's Rinnegan. "We don't know pain? Have you ever ran for your life on your birthday because the majority of the village wanted you dead?" Sasuke and Hinata felt bad for their blonde teammate for the hate he had to suffer, but Naruto wasn't finished. "Have you ever been forced to watch your whole clan get slaughtered in front of you by your own brother?" Sasuke's hand clenched into a fist at the memory of Itachi but then heard Naruto keep going. "Have you tried to be kidnapped by a foreign country on your birthday to be turned into a breeder to give their country your bloodline only to be stopped and your uncle forced to give his life to keep the peace?" Hinata had a few tears at the memory of her late uncle, which was the reason why Neji hated her. Inari began to cry as Naruto let him fall to the ground as he marched out of the house. Kakashi yelled after him, "Naruto! Where are you going?" "To train," as he slammed the door, nearly knocking it off its hinges. A few minutes later he stopped in the middle of the forest and drew his katana before launching wind blades at the surrounding trees, cutting them clean through only for them to fall a few seconds later only to be incinerated later by a firestorm summoned from his blade. Raising himself into the air with his gravity manipulation, he then proceeded to close his eyes in focus, then suddenly the snapped open again as he thrust his hands out while yelling, "Shinra Tensai!" causing a massive crater to form, clearing all life within a half a mile. He then lowered himself to the ground tiredly before he collapsed asleep. It was the next morning where we find a feminine-looking young man walking around looking for herbs to heal his master with. As he was walking, he suddenly found a large pile of trees that looked as if something just pushed them all into a large pile in a perfect circle. Using his shinobi training, he easily got over it only to see one of the young ninja he and his master had encountered the day before. He reached down looking like he was about to choke him before suddenly putting his hand lightly on his chest and gently shook the blonde while gently saying, "Wake up, if you sleep out here you'll catch your death." Haku's eyes widened at the purple ringed eyes as he realized that this young nin was like her. Naruto shook his head while sitting up before looking at the young feminine man kneeling in front of him. He smiled like that before he heard the young man speak. "What are you doing out here and what happened to the forest?" Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly at seeing what happened to the forest before answering, "Well, I'm out here training and all this was caused by one of my jutsu. I was a bit mad last night and needed to vent some." "What are you doing out here?" Haku laughed at how he was changing the subject but went with it. "I'm out here looking for some herbs to help my precious person since he's injured." Naruto nodded before speaking, "That's very honorable. Protect him, cause it's those that are close to us that truly inspired to do our best." Haku nodded, "That's a very good point of view. You will become very strong. I also believe that you do your best when you're doing it for someone close to you." Naruto nodded in agreement. It was a few hours later that Naruto got back to Tazuna's home after helping Haku pick some herbs after destroying part of the forest. It was the next morning. 3 of the 4 ninja were ready to go with the bridge builder, but the blonde member was still asleep from his hard training since Kakashi wanted him to get his rest after using up a lot of chakra the day before. As they made it to the bridge, they saw all the workers unconscious with a heavy mist over the whole area. Tazuna looked around before yelling out, "What's going on here?" A dark chuckling made itself known as the forms of several Zabuza clones revealed themselves before his deep voice echoed throughout the mist. "Last chance, copycat. Give me the bridge builder and you can keep your miserable life. Kakashi only laughed at the suggestion. Sasuke, do it. Sasuke blurred away only for him to reappear a second later as the clones all exploded into water. Zabuza and another figure that ended up to be the hunter Nin revealed themselves in the mist before Zabuza turned to his shorter apprentice before speaking. Looks like you have a rival for speed. The fake hunter Nin only nodded in response before he and Sasuke disappeared. Kakashi turned and faced the real Zabuza. Drawing kunai in each hand, he entered a defensive fighting style and prepared to face Zabuza. Haku and Sasuke were a short ways away engaging in a taijutsu fight. The smacking of limbs colliding with rival limbs. They finally clashed senbon to kunai as Haku spoke. It appears I have you where I want you. Sasuke looked puzzled at Haku. How is that exactly? The surrounding air is filled with water, and while you need both hands to make hand signs, I however do not. Haku finished before he started doing single-handed hand signs. Hyoden, 1000 water needles. Sasuke's eyes widened as Haku leapt away from him as he was assaulted by the frigid ice needles. When the mist cleared, it showed Sasuke standing and doing a very good imitation of a porcupine. Sasuke shook his head and took a deep breath as he channeled fire chakra through his body, melting the needles that were embedded in his flesh. Turning around, he faced Haku as he began going through hand seals before breathing deeply. Kaden, Fire Dragon Missile. Sasuke then exhaled a torrent of flames that took the shape of a dragon as it let out a roar before exploding, consuming Haku in the explosion. Sasuke panted a bit from the powerful technique as he squinted his eyes to try and see what was left of Haku before Sharingan eyes widened upon seeing a small dome of ice amidst the flames. The dome then melted, revealing Haku standing there unscathed. Sasuke gritted his teeth as he pulled out a second kunai before switching both to reverse grip and prepared a defensive stance. Haku smirked under his mask as he went through hand signs as Sasuke tensed his body in preparation as Haku called out the name of his technique, Hyoden, Demon Ice Mirrors. Sasuke's eyes narrowed upon seeing the mirrors surround him. His eyes widened upon seeing Haku step into the mirror and his reflection appear on all of them. Give up, none have seen my mirrors from the inside and live. Spoke Haku as he pulled out a fist of senbon. Sasuke's only response was to narrow his eyes as he prepared his kunai to defend. Haku sighed as he proceeded to jump from mirror to mirror, launching senbon. Back at Tazuna's home, we find Naruto woken from his sleep by Tsunami screaming. He immediately grabbed Shinryu's handle as he jumped out of the window onto the roof to see a couple samurai wannabes dragging Tsunami down the docks. Before he could do anything, he saw Inari run after them with a kitchen knife in hand. Immediately substituted, Inari then using his speed grabbed Tsunami from the thug's clutches. The two goons immediately turned and saw one of the Konoha nin holding the woman they came to take as a hostage as he set her down, then used his sword to expertly cut the ropes holding her. They pointed their swords at the kid before smirking and charging what they thought would be an easy kill. Naruto seemingly just vanished to them and appeared behind them, flicking the blood off his sword. The thugs' eyes widened as they fell to the ground, their chest cut open by Orochimaru's apprentice. Naruto turned back to Tazuna's home and spoke to Inari, who was standing there protectively over his mom. Inari, they need me over on the bridge. Take your mom and find somewhere safe to hide, okay? Inari nodded as he dragged his mom back into their house. Seeing them safe for now, he jumped into the trees towards the bridge in order to help his team. Back at the bridge, we find Sasuke breathing hard with several needles all over his body. He held onto his kunai, deflecting all the senbon he could, but there were so many. He was able to scratch the fake hunter nin's mask with a kunai when his Sharingan evolved to its third tomo, but after the ice user had sped up again and Sasuke lost track of him. Sasuke's head jerked behind him when he heard Haku speak. Give up now or else I cannot guarantee your survival. Sasuke glared at the Yuki clan member. I will never give up. An Uchiha never backs down. Spoke the duck-haired Avenger. Haku sighed at his response as he raised two more fists full of senbon as he proceeded to barrage Sasuke with a new level of ferocity. Naruto was running top speed toward the bridge. As he made it through the tree cover surrounding the bridge, the first thing he saw was Kakashi fighting Zabuza, but then he saw something that shocked him greatly. He saw a dome of mirrors, and in the middle he saw a massive volley of senbon impact with Sasuke's body as Sasuke fell to his knees before he collapsed completely. Naruto's eyes widened before he shouted, "Sasuke." Then something that no one thought possible happened. As if possessed, Naruto grabbed his own wrist and pulled, and rather than pull the whole arm, a cable carrying what appeared to be dozens of warheads came out before firing and creating massive explosions that destroyed all the ice mirrors and blowing Haku far across the clearing, covered in burns and cuts from shrapnel. His mask was shattered and his face slowly became exposed. As Naruto came blurred in front of Haku, the last piece of his mask fell off his face as Naruto stopped dead in his tracks with his eyes wide at who the hunter Nin was. Haku looked up at the blonde Rinnegan wielder with eyes filled with defeat, as if his whole meaning of existence was stolen from him, before speaking. "Go ahead, finish me. I am a broken tool and Zabuza-sama has no need for a broken tool." Naruto's eyes widened at the words spoken by the ice-wielding orphan boy. "Don't be a baka, Haku. Tools can be repaired or reforged into something new. You don't need to die." Haku's eyes closed. "You don't understand. I have been defeated. Zabuza-sama will not accept me back." As Haku spoke those words, tears came from his eyes as he knew his precious person would accept him back. As they were talking, they suddenly heard a sound that sounded like 1,000 birds all crying out. As they turned, they saw Kakashi holding a ball of lightning in his hand, and Zabuza was being restrained by several dogs of various sizes. Haku's eyes widened at the sight of his master. He quickly drew some senbon and threw them at Naruto, who was forced to block them. When Naruto turned back to Haku, he was gone. He turned his head to find him, only to see him emerge from a mirror only about a meter from where Kakashi was thrusting his Reikiri. Kakashi had finally captured Zabuza and had begun his charge, which was unstoppable at this point no matter what Zabuza might try. But as he was about to make contact with Zabuza, he saw a figure jump between them. He tried to turn to avoid the boy, but it was unnecessary as the young man was suddenly pulled out of the way by an unseen force as his hand plunged into Zabuza's heart. Zabuza coughed up blood as he fell to the ground hard. Haku, after recovering from the Bansho Tenin, ran over to Zabuza's side as he was dying. He cried as Zabuza turned his head and looked him in the eye. "Haku, live on, do not mourn me for long but move on, but as my last request, take my blade, do not let me fade from the memory, make my legacy live on through you. Make sure everyone remembers the demon of the mist as you become the demon of the ice." As he finished his sentence, Haku let tears fall from his eyes as he knelt by his fallen master before his head snapped up at the sound of an annoying voice. "My, how the mighty have fallen. I knew he was nothing but a baby demon, and now that he's out of the way, my men here can finish the job." The man speaking revealed himself to be Gato, who had brought with him an army of a little under 100 armed thugs. "I'm going to have to pay him back for failing, so maybe after I kill the rest of them and cut off his head for his bounty, I'll have his body cut into 100 pieces, then threw them into the sea." Ending with a maniacal grin, he was forced to take a step back as the temperature dropped several degrees. Everyone turned to see Haku stand up with the Kabikirihucho in his grasp as everyone saw frost creep up the sides of the blade. Gato seemed to freeze in his spot as he made eye contact with the apprentice of the man he just slandered. Steam seemed to come off of the large sword from the sheer cold. Gato took a few steps back into his personal army as Haku ran forward toward the cowardly drug tycoon. As the men got in the way of Haku to protect their boss, they were mercilessly cut down by the massive blade wielded by the lithe form of the young man in front of them. As the crowd of hired swords moved aside, unwilling to die for the corrupt midget, Gato backed away from the young icy bringer of death as Haku's silhouette walked closer with his long hair billowing behind him. Gato was beyond terrified at this point. Gato closed his eyes waiting for the icy cold blade to end his existence, but instead of a blade he felt a hand grab his head. He opened his eyes only to look into the icy cold eyes of Haku as uttered a single word, "Freeze." After hearing the young man utter the lone word, he realized he couldn't move as a numbness spread through his whole body as he was frozen from the inside out. After the process was finished, Hake punched the frozen man, causing the ice to shatter. Haku turned around and walked back to the group of Konoha ninjas before he collapsed on the ground. The whole group was shocked at the young man, but unfortunately the thugs came out of their stupor first. "Oi, that Brad just killed our meal ticket. Now we'll have to ransack the town, and that girl is looking awfully pretty down there." Hinata was conflicted between throwing up and shivering at the thought of those people touching her. Though apparently Hinata wasn't the only one disturbed by their words, Naruto simply thrust out a hand before saying in a low voice, "Shinra Tensei." All the thugs suddenly found themselves forcefully thrown off the bridge by the invisible force that was the Shinra Tensei. Just as the last thug fell off the unfinished back of the bridge, the whole town of Nami showed up with axes of pitchforks. Inari, who was leading them with a crossbow, looked around and saw Haku and Zabuza laying on the ground, Kakashi and Naruto tired, and Hinata healing a seriously wounded Sasuke. Inari rubbed the back of his head before sheepishly asking, "Hehe, are we too late to help out?" only to receive a deadpan look from the whole Team 7, including the recently conscious Sasuke. The whole mob of villagers blushed while rubbing the back of their heads. It was a week later that we find our heroes walking across the bridge that they helped to protect during the construction. As Team 7 plus Haku waved at the villagers as they walked across the bridge. Inari turned to his grandfather. "Grandpa, we still need to name the bridge." "You're right, Inari. Its name should represent hope and inspire those who see it. Let's call it the Great Naruto Bridge." The whole town cheered at the suggestion from the aged bridge builder. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.